Good morning. Today I'm going to read a story from a Spark Story Bible. This is the story of Jesus walking on the water. And the reason I'm reading this story this morning is because this is the story that we will be talking about in worship tomorrow. And so I wanted to make sure that kids, you heard this story before our worship service tomorrow. And so let's read this story together, Walking on Water. The disciples were just walking up on their boat. They had been out on the water all night. Big yawn, stretch. It was so early. The sun wasn't even up yet. Andrew rubbed his eyes, looked out into the sea, and said, "Hey!" Then he whispered, "Do you see what I see?" "It's a ghost!" James cried out in fear. The disciples were shaking in their sandals. They were so scared. Through the fog, they could see the outline of a person walking on the water. It was Jesus. "Don't be afraid. It's just me," Jesus said. He waved a friendly hello. "It's really you, Jesus? Tell me to walk on the water to you," Peter said bravely. "Okay," Jesus shrugged. "Come on out, Peter. The water is fine." Gulp. Peter swallowed hard. He placed one foot out of the boat onto the water. Do you see him there, stepping out onto the boat? Out of the boat, onto the water. There goes Peter. Plop. He didn't go under. He tried the other foot. Plop. He was standing on the water. He kept his eyes glued on Jesus as he took a few careful steps. He walked faster and faster, splish, splash. Only his feet were getting wet. Jesus smiled at him. Peter felt the wind blowing on his face. He took his eyes off of Jesus and looked up at the dark clouds. He felt afraid. Uh-oh, his ankles were wet. Uh-oh, his knees were wet. Uh-oh, Peter was sinking. "Help me, Jesus, save me," he yelled. Jesus reached out his hand and pulled Peter out of the sea. "Why did you stop looking at me?" Jesus asked, holding tightly onto his friend. "Don't you trust me?" The wind stopped. They climbed back into the boat full of the cheering disciples. "Hooray! This proves it," they said. "You really are the Son of God." From that day on, the disciples were excited to tell everyone they met about the power of Jesus. So in this story, Peter wanted to walk out on the water to Jesus, and what happened when he was looking at Jesus is that he was able to walk on the water. When he kept his eyes focused on Jesus, he stayed on top of the water. And the moment he looked at the storm and took his eyes off of Jesus and got afraid, he started to sink. And this is a good example of how during this time we need to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. Even though there's a lot of things that we can be afraid of, we need to keep our eyes on Jesus and make sure that we're going to have some fear, but we know that Jesus is with us. I also want to give you a little idea. Tomorrow in our children's message, we're going to do a little experiment called Sink or Float, and I'm going to do this with a lot of different objects, but today I want you to guess whether this little Geotrax guy is going to sink or float. What do you think? Okay, let's give it a try. Plop him in. Oh, he went all the way to the bottom, so he didn't float. He's heavier than... How about this raspberry? Do you think that'll sink or float? Let's give it a try. Oh, it went down, but then it came back up. So tomorrow in our children's message in worship, I'm going to do this sink or float experiment with a lot of different objects and talk a little bit more about Jesus and Peter walking on the water. I also want to remind you that your Lenten crosses are a wonderful way to keep engaged in faith. I did set these out in the office at church, and you can stop and pick one up if you do not have one. Today I'd like to remember the nail. The nail is to remind us of Jesus' sacrifice, how he died on the cross for our sins. The nail nailed him to the cross and allowed us to be forgiven for all the things that we do each and every day to hurt others or to hurt Jesus. And so today we remember the pain that Jesus suffered, and that we are forgiven and given new life through Jesus' death on the cross. So remember to take time with your crosses each day, and sink or float is a fun thing to try at home. And then also read the story about Jesus walking on the water. Have a great day today. Have a wonderful weekend. Hope you join us for worship tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel. And you'll continue to be in our thoughts and prayers. Enjoy the sunshine today. Bye-bye.